Potter.
Scotty B going to work in the paint.
Eastern Conference Final. New NBA champion. And it's a team from Toronto, Canada. We the North are now we the champions.
What is going on, Raptors Nation? It is Luca here, back with the Raptors Nation podcast on this August 15th. The Raptors have released their 2024-2025 regular season schedule. And in today's pod, I'm going to break everything down for you. We're going to go through all of the games month by month. So let's get into it. Before I do just that, do me a solid, everybody. Drop a like on the video. Subscribe to the channel if you are new. All of my Raptors content will be on this channel moving forward. And it just so happens that the regular season schedule dropped at the perfect time because I will be taking a little hiatus, a little break starting tomorrow for about a month. I will be doing a little bit of posting on my main channel, but in terms of Raptors stuff on this channel, I'm going to be taking a bit of a break. So the schedule came at a perfect time as I get to talk about the schedule before taking that break. But yeah, guys, like, subscribe. Give this podcast a 5-star review wherever you get your favorite podcast, Apple, iTunes, Spotify. The Raptors, their schedule has been set for their 30th anniversary season as that rebrand, it's lingering. It's going to be a lot of cool stuff in store for the Raptors and their 30th season going into 2024-2025. So the schedule has been released. Before we get into the schedule, and we look at the games month by month, just a couple of things off the bat here. The Raptors Emirates NBA Cup schedule was already released the other day. November 12th against the Bucks. November 15th against the Pistons. November 29th against the Heat. And November 3rd against the Pacers. So these are going to be the Raptors group stage games. And basically, each team will play 4 group stage games on cup nights, and these will take place on Tuesdays and Fridays between November 12th and December 3rd. And these games will be included in the Raptors schedule. All these games count toward the Raptors' 82-game schedule. The only game that wouldn't count is if the Raptors make it to the final. That game would not count. So those games were revealed to us. Another thing off the bat here is that for the second straight season, the Raptors will have only one game on U.S. national TV. That will be a January 8th matchup against the Knicks on ESPN. And this will now be tied for the fewest the Raptors have been scheduled for since 2013-14, the start of the Masai Ujiri era. And this is per Josh Lewenberg. So Raptors had one last season. They'll only have one this season. I mean, as to be expected, the Raptors are rebuilding. And that matchup will be on ESPN against OG Anunoby and the Knicks. Okay, let's get into this thing, and we will look at the Raptors' schedule. So here we go, guys. The regular season will begin at home October 23rd against the Cleveland Cavaliers. Then the Raptors will be taking on the Philadelphia 76ers, Nick Nurse and company on October 25th. Then the Raptors will have their first back-to-back of the season, October 26th at Minnesota. Raptors will take on the Denver Nuggets on October 28th at home, and then they will be in Charlotte October 30th. So first month here of the schedule, biggest takeaway, I mean, that's going to be a rough 4 games to open up the season for the Raptors. You're taking on teams with title aspirations. I mean, I wouldn't consider the Cleveland Cavaliers a title contender, but I would surely consider Philadelphia, Minnesota, and Denver all title contenders. And then you get a winnable game, your first winnable game really, at Charlotte. So this is going to be a first tough month for the Raptors, first tough few games for the Raptors. And then it extends out. November 1st against the Lakers. You're going to host that game. November 2nd against the Kings. November 4th at Denver. So they're going to be seeing the Denver Nuggets again. November 6th at the Kings. They're going to be taking on the Kings 2 times in the span of a few days. At the Clippers in their new building. November 9th on my birthday. At the Lakers on November 10th. So that will be another back-to-back, obviously taking on the LA teams. And then at Milwaukee, this will be the Raptors' first Emirates NBA Cup game. November 12th, as they will take on Gary Trent Jr. for the first time since his departure. So before we continue on with November here, I mean, you want to go as far as the first 10 games of the season for the Raptors. So that's Cleveland, Philly, Minnesota, Denver, Charlotte, Lakers, Kings, Nuggets, Kings, Clippers. That's tough. And really 11 games when you include the Los Angeles Lakers, and then 12 when you include the Bucks. So the first 12 games for the Raptors going to be an absolute dogfight. Really, we're going to find out a lot about this team and how this season is going to ultimately be, because this thing could get ugly very quick, or the Raptors could surprise a lot of people very quickly. Because I'm telling you, this is probably as tough of a first part of a schedule for the Raptors that I can remember for a long, long time. Especially considering the Raptors are going to be a rebuilding team. They're not expected to win a whole ton of games going into the season anyway. But the first 12 games up until the Milwaukee game, which will be the Emirates Cup game, I mean, this is going to be tough for the Raptors. During this, first 12 games, they're only taking on one team that had a losing record last season, the Charlotte Hornets. So that is 11 quality teams that are going to be vying to trying to be a top team in their respective conference going up against the Raptors. And then really, if you want to extend it out even more, okay, they have the Detroit Pistons on November 15th, winnable game. That's going to be another NBA Cup game. Then you take on the Boston Celtics for the first time this season, defending champion Celtics in Boston on November 16th. Then you got Pascal Siakam and the Pacers coming to town for the first time this season on November 18th. Then you got the Timberwolves November 21st. And then you're at Cleveland on November 24th before you take on the Detroit Pistons again in Detroit on November 25th. So really, the first 17 games are going to be absolutely crazy. So excluding that November 25th game against the Pistons that I just mentioned, the Raptors' first 17 games, guys, only two teams had a losing record last season: the Hornets and the Pistons. And here's a news flash. Both those teams are expected to be better this season. I really like the offseason that the Pistons had. Thought it was very underrated. Added some nice veteran pieces. The Hornets should be healthy. They should be a much better team. So the first 17 games of this season, it's going to be awfully tough for the Raptors. So like I said, we're going to learn quickly about, is this going to be another one of those seasons we're already talking about tanking early on, or are the Raptors going to be able to give teams their best punch? Because really, you're going to get the Raptors' best punch early and into the season when guys are fresh, knock on wood, no injuries. You're going to get Scotty Barnes' best, RJ Barrett, Emmanuel Quickly. Both of those guys expected to take leaps, along with Barnes continuing to improve. But obviously, there's going to be a lot of young guys who are going to get opportunities on this team. The Grady Dick, Jacoby Walters. So this is going to be a very interesting stretch. Like I said, first 12, you can extend it to the first 17, first 10, going to be tough in their own right. Raptors going to have 7 Western Conference opponents in their first 10 games. I don't remember the last time that's ever happened. So it's going to be tough for the Raptors. Okay, so let's move on here. Where were we? Okay, Detroit, November 25th, right here. Then they're going to have the Pelicans, Miami for the first time this season in Miami on November 29th. And then that's basically November. So looking at November in a nutshell, I know I've been talking about, the first 10 games, 12 games, 17 games, all that. But you look at November in a nutshell, guys, it's going to be tough. November is going to be awfully tough. Outside of Detroit 2 times, November is going to be just filled with high-level teams that are going to be looking to want to, win games early on. And there's going to be a lot of road games as well. That's another big takeaway here. You're talking about 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 road games in the month of November. And your only home games in November are going to be Lakers, Kings, Pistons, Pacers, and Minnesota. So there's no free wins there at all. So really, the first part of this schedule for the Raptors, October going into the end of November, there's not a whole lot of wins to come by, especially if the Raptors are reeling out of the gate and, they don't come out with their best foot forward. All right, so let's now get into December. So when you look at December, the Raptors will already have had 3 NBA Cup games played. So the Bucks November 12th, Pistons November 15th, and then the Heat on November 29th. That's going to be the other NBA Cup game. And then the Raptors' final NBA Cup game will be on December 3rd. So the Raptors have December 1st against Miami right over here. And then this matchup here at home against Siakam and the Pacers is going to be their last NBA Cup game. So the Raptors finished 1-3 last season. When you look at the NBA Cup schedule, it's going to be tough. I mean, I think they'll beat Detroit, but Milwaukee, Miami, Indy. I know Miami didn't make any major splashes, nor did Indy, but Indy's coming off Eastern Conference Finals. I think Miami's going to be good if they're healthy. And then Milwaukee, I thought, they had a nice little offseason with what they were working with. So I realistically see probably one win again with this NBA Cup, unless the Raptors can, stun Indiana or Miami, which is definitely doable. So I would say 2-2 is being fair. 1-3 though, yeah, I would probably bet on that, to be honest with you guys, just because really this is going to be a tough group again, and we'll see, because we know what the NBA Cup, the top teams, and then the top 2 second place teams advance. So the Raptors probably got to be flirting with like a 3-1 record if they do want to get out of this group. So, yeah, they will end their NBA Cup schedule here against Indiana. And then moving along here in December, OKC, they're going to be taking on them at home. Dallas, then they're going to be taking on OG Anunoby and the New York Knicks. This will be on December 9th. And this is important because if OG is healthy, this will actually mark OG's first game against the Raptors since the trade. Because remember, OG in Toronto. Because remember, OG did return to Toronto last season. I believe it was in March, but he did not play due to injuries. So it will be nice to see OG play in Toronto for the first time since being traded. This will be the game you want circled on your calendar. Then the Raptors are going to be taking on the Nets, who are just going to be awful this season. Then they're going to be taking on Fred VanVleet and the Rockets at home December 22nd. And this is going to be important too, because like Anunoby, VanVleet, when he returned to Toronto, he did not play due to injury as well. So assuming VanVleet is healthy here, he's going to get to play in this game in Toronto. So that's going to be exciting. Then the Raptors have 2 road games back-to-back. Knicks on December 23rd. Not going to play, obviously, Christmas Eve or Christmas. Then they got the Grizzlies in Memphis on Boxing Day. They got the Hawks December 29th. And then they will take on the Boston Celtics in Boston on December 31st. So, man, December is going to be tough too, guys. This first, 2024 is going to be an absolute battle-tested schedule for the Raptors. Like, there's no easy games here. Like, look at December. We just talked about how November is going to be tough. The only easy game in December, Brooklyn game. I don't know how Atlanta's going to be. They're probably going to be bad too, but a lot of teams that are expected to do really well this season. So you go to November, not a lot of winnable games. December, other than the Brooklyn game, going to be a gauntlet. Couple of, tough road games. You're going to have a lot more home games, which is the nice part, because look at this, guys. From December 1st to December 22nd, you're at home. Wow. So that's actually crazy. If you think about it, the Raptors are going to be at home for like 3 weeks. They got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 home games in a row. So this is where you can see maybe the Raptors go on a little bit of a run where they are turning heads. Maybe they can stun the likes of the Pacers. Remember, they were competitive against the Pacers. They can beat the Heat. OKC, Dallas. Those are going to be tough games, obviously. But then, New York, that's going to be a tough game too. But Brooklyn, Houston, those could potentially be some games where the Raptors win. The Raptors could be entering this January either bottom of the barrel, okay, let's tank, let's hold out, on trying to win here. Let's get a high draft pick for 2025. I mean, that would be the narrative if the Raptors completely come out flat, or if the Raptors can survive this first part, that'll tell you something. That'll tell you that this team could potentially be a surprise story for this season. Now, I'm going to get into where I ultimately see the Raptors finishing in the East at the end of this video. But yeah, let's move along here. So 2024 going to be tough. Okay, let's see what January has in store. Okay, so Brooklyn at home, Orlando at home, Milwaukee at home. So a couple of home games to begin the new year in 2025. Then they're going to have the Knicks on the road January 8th, Cavaliers on the road January 9th, Pistons on the road January 11th. Then they're going to be hosting the Warriors January 13th, hosting the Celtics January 15th. Then you got the Bucks January 17th in Milwaukee, Orlando January 21st at home. Then you're going to have a little back-to-back here, or you're going to have back-to-back matchups against the Hawks, but there's going to be a day off in between, January 23rd, 25th on the road in Atlanta, the 27th against the Pelicans at home, and then on the road against the Wizards the 29th, and then you host the Chicago Bulls on January 31st. So this is a lot more favorable. You know, there's a lot more winnable games here. Chicago, they're probably going to be a mess. They're going to be bad. Washington's going to be bad. Atlanta, I think, is going to be bad. So that's already 4 matchups that the Raptors could potentially win. The Pistons, you got them again. We know the Pistons, for as much as they're always expected to take that leap, they never do. And then, yeah, you got Brooklyn at the beginning of the new year on New Year's Day, January 1st. So really, there's a lot more winnable games here. You count the Brooklyn game, Detroit, that's 2. We'll give Atlanta the benefit of the doubt on one of them. So we'll count Atlanta for 1. That's 3. Washington, that's 4. Bulls, that's 5. So that's already 5 games that I could see the Raptors easily winning all those games. Maybe even 6 if they sweep the Atlanta series. But yeah, I mean, there's some other teams too. How's Golden State going to be? Are they going to be in panic mode at this time, dealing with injuries? They didn't really make big moves in the offseason that leads you to think they're going to be a powerhouse. Obviously, New York's going to be tough, taking on them. Cleveland, Milwaukee, Orlando's going to be good again, you would think. New Orleans. So there are some winnable games here. You're going to have a balance of road and home games, but definitely a lot more favorable than the first couple of months of the season in January. And then again, January 8th will be the Raptors' lone game on U.S. national TV. That will be an ESPN game against the Knicks in New York. So, hey, at least the Raptors get that one game against OG Anunoby and the Knicks. So, January, there are winnable games. And then another thing that stands out to me is there's not that long West Coast trip. We usually saw it in seasons past in January, and we'll get to February more in detail here in just a moment. But really, if you kind of look at it, there's no long, grueling West Coast trip in the new year. You got to go really to that early part of November when you look at that West Coast trip, and it only ends at 4 games. So that 5-6 West Coast trip doesn't exist this season for the Toronto Raptors. So that would be nice, because usually the Raptors in seasons past got it towards the end of January, early February. But as you can tell here, no long West Coast trip. So the Raptors, nice little balance here of home and road games. Like I said, some opportunities here for wins. And yeah, that's going to lead us into February now. So we are going to look at February. Raptors, 3 straight home games to begin February. They're going to be taking on the Clippers, Kawhi Leonard and the Clippers. We'll see what the state the Clippers are in. That's an interesting team, because I think for the Clippers, they're either going to be really good or really bad, because really that team's a Kawhi Leonard injury away from having things implode. We know James Harden doesn't do well when he's the only guy carrying things over there. So Clippers, Knicks, Memphis, 3 straight home games to begin February. Then they're going to have 3 straight road games after that. A little bit of a fun balance there. OKC, Houston, Philly. Those are going to be tough games, really. And again, looking at this thing, February, first 6 games, tough to find a win. If we're being honest. Like, again, what's the state of the Clippers at this point? I think Memphis is going to be really good this season. I think Houston's going to be better. So tough 6 games to open up February. Then Cleveland, Miami, and Phoenix all at home, followed by the Celtics. That's also going to be a home game. So 4 straight home games after 3 straight road games. A little bit of a interesting pattern there. 3 straight home, 3 straight road, and then 4 straight home. And then 4 straight road leading into March. So that's very, very interesting pattern of games. There's going to be a lot of the Raptors just being on the road, being at home. And I kind of like that. You don't want to, you want the team to be momentum. You don't want them to be constantly, going back and forth. So I like the fact that when they're at home, the Raptors are going to have an opportunity to be there for a stretch of games, to build some momentum, get on a potential winning streak before you hit the road for a couple of games in a row. So where are we here? We'll pick it up with here on the February 21st game, Miami, Phoenix, Boston. So again, tough games there. But then you got Indiana, Chicago, Orlando, or Indiana, Chicago to end February. So overall, I think it's safe to say January is looking like the easiest month to this point. February, gonna be tough if the teams that you expect to be good are good again. And, Chicago is going to be at the bottom of the standings, you would think. But, man, outside of the Bulls, all these teams are expected to be playoff teams, or at least playing teams. I do have the Rockets making the play-in. You know what? For the sake of it, we'll say the Rockets. We'll say the Rockets and the Bulls. But other than that, I mean, all these teams are expected to be in the playoffs. And, the Clippers, the Knicks, OKC expected to be the 1 seed, the Sixers, Miami, the Suns, the Pacers. So tough schedule to say the least. January, the only glimmer of hope in terms of strength of schedule. But you move along here, guys, now to March. Let's see what March has in store. And again, what's the state of the Raptors going to be in? Because remember, this time last year in March, the season was basically a wash. After that Scottie Barnes injury, March 1st of last season, the rest of the season, you knew the tank commanders were in full effect. The Raptors were not trying to go for anything. And at this point, it's going to be very interesting, coming out of the trade deadline, who's going to be healthy, what are the Raptors going to look like, who's going to be on the roster. You would think Bruce Brown's going to get traded at this point, a couple of maybe other moves, Jakob Poeltl potentially, if things hit the fan and the Raptors are really bad out of the gate, could be another name on the move. So March, it will be interesting. Either the Raptors are fighting for a play-in spot or they're completely at the bottom, counting the days of the season to be over, just as was the case last season. So let's look at March here. They begin with at Orlando. So definitely a tough way to start the month of March. Going to be taking on the Jazz at home, followed by the Wizards and the Wizards. So, hey, potentially a 3-game winning streak there. Maybe that's going to be the Raptors' first 3-game winning streak of the season. Remember, they had to wait a whole while for the first pizza party last season. I hope that's not the case again this season. Then they got Philadelphia at home. And then this is probably the closest thing to, the West Coast trip that we're going to see. Again, typically it would be that 5-6 West Coast trip in years past. But right here, it'll be Jazz, Blazers, Suns, Warriors. This is going to be the Raptors West Coast trip, March 14th to the 19th. So really, early on in the season, the Raptors are going to have that West Coast trip when you look at November 4th to November 10th. So that's 4 games. And then this is going to be their other one here in March. Only a 4-gamer. So, 5-6 West Coast trip not happening this season for the Raptors. And this is going to be a lot more favorable one for the Raptors when looking at the Blazers, Suns, Warriors, and Spurs. Jazz, Blazers, Suns, and Warriors. Definitely winnable games compared to their first West Coast trip of the season. So, then the Raptors are going to be taking on Victor Wembanyama and the Spurs the 23rd. I believe that's the first time they're actually taking on the Spurs. Wow. So the Raptors are going to be waiting a while before they see Wemby, who's probably going to be a monster this season. All the way on March 23rd will be their first matchup against the Spurs. Remember, Barnes and Wemby had that masterclass duel early on last season, which was one of the highlights of the season for the Raptors. Then they got Washington on the road, Brooklyn on the road, Charlotte at home. So another potential 3-game winning streak here for the Raptors, going to be taking on teams who I would think are going to be bad this season. And then they close out March against the Sixers. And at this point, the Sixers are probably going to be battling for like a top 3 spot, you would think, in the East. So I would say compared to the other months, January favorable, February tough, but then March, I think I would honestly say March is probably the easiest month right now for the Raptors, most favorable, because, you got the Jazz, you got the Wizards a couple of times, you got the Jazz again, teams that are going to be on the bottom, Portland, and then Brooklyn, Washington, Brooklyn, Charlotte, San Antonio on the 23rd. Forgot about him here. Yeah, so there's a lot of wins actually in March. There are a lot of wins. This is definitely the Raptors' easiest month. And again, it's going to be interesting to see what the state of the team is going into March, because if the Raptors are in the play-in, this is going to be a great opportunity for them to make up ground on some of those other teams, and a great opportunity to continue to win games, potentially making things interesting. That will lead us into the final month of the season, April. Raptors on the road against the Bulls on April 1st, April Fools. Then they're going to be taking on Portland at home, followed by Detroit at home. That's going to be a back-to-back, followed by Brooklyn on the road. So another opportunity for a 3-game winning streak, 4-game winning streak, because you see right there, they got Charlotte right after, and then Dallas, and then San Antonio. So April, all these games are winnable, guys, except call it the Dallas Mavericks. So March and April, very, very favorable for the Raptors. And really, you look at this first part of the schedule, absolute gauntlet when looking at October, November, December, and you can even make a case for January before things, start, or even February is rough. So yeah, first 3 months, January is a little bit more flexible, but then February's rough. But then March and April, very favorable for the Raptors, particularly in April, where they can literally win all these games except the Mavericks game. So really what I'm saying here, guys, is if the Raptors somehow survive the first part of this gauntlet of a schedule, they make it to the end of the schedule where they're still in playing position, they can actually finish up this season very, very strong and end up being a playing team. It's going to begin tough, but then it's going to be much easier towards the end of it. And again, how are the Raptors going to be? What is the state of this team going to be around March and April? Because remember, it could be irrelevant. At that time, the Raptors could have already just been beaten to a pulp by that first part of the schedule, where the last part of the schedule doesn't even matter. Maybe some of those teams that I think are going to be bad take leaps, the Hornets of the world, the Pistons of the world. So really, it's going to be interesting, but that's kind of the theme. It's going to be tough early on, and then it's going to be a lot more favorable to close things out. But now I want to hear from all of you. How many games do you think the Raptors win, and where do you think the Raptors are situated when it's all said and done in the Eastern Conference? I'm going to stick with my prediction. I'm going to say 9th or 10th. I do think the Raptors will be in the play-in. That's probably very, very lenient, because I know a lot of people probably think the Raptors are going to be dead in the water at this point. But I'll give the Raptors the benefit of the doubt. I will say they will be a 9th or 10th seed. I do think when you look at the Eastern Conference, the top 8 are locked. And then the play-in, I think, is going to be the Raptors. And the other spot, I think it's going to come down to Hornets, Pistons, and more likely the Atlanta Hawks. Because as long as Trae Young is there healthy, he's going to give that team a chance to win. Whoever they play against. So this team, I mean, they won 25 games last season, and that was probably as brutal of a season that we can remember. Yeah, you got to go back to, the old days of the Raptors stinking up to join. So the Raptors dealt with a lot of injuries. They were still able to win 25 games, even though they ended the season with a 4-game losing streak. So again, if health is on this team's side, I'm going over 30. I think they do win over 30 games. I can see them increasing their win total at least by, I want to say, +8 if guys are healthy and, certain players progress and all that. So that's my prediction. I think the Raptors do go over 31.5, not by much, but they do go over, and they will find themselves in the play-in. You got to take a look last season, guys. I mean, the Atlanta Hawks made the play-in tournament, winning 36 games. And I could argue that the East is going to be even worse this season at the bottom. So the Raptors could potentially be in the play-in as a 35, even 34 win team. 36 just to be safe, just comparing it to last season. But the Hawks were 10 games under 500, and they still made the play-in. I could see something similar happening with the Raptors, where they end up with a bad under 500 record, but they still end up securing a 9th or more likely a 10th spot in the East. So that is my prediction. Where do you see the Raptors finishing, guys? Let me know your thoughts. down below. Give me your record prediction, where they finish in the East, and any other thoughts you have to the Raptors 2024-2025 schedule release. That is it for me, guys. Like I said, going to be taking a little bit of a break from this channel, so you will not see me on this channel for a month. We'll be back in a month's time, September 16th to be exact. So, look, I hope you guys have a great rest of the summer, and I will be back in the nitty-gritty part of the NBA calendar when we're going to be getting ready for the Raptors preseason and then the regular season, which we now know the dates. Get your calendars, circle the games. It's going to be a fun one. Raptors upcoming schedule. That is it for me, guys. Thanks so much for watching. This is Luca signing off. Till next time, stay safe.